It's been a long week, right? Are you ready to wind down? Why not? It's time for the Wine Time Fridays podcast with Shelley and Phil. Neither are sommeliers, but both have a deep passion for life, each other, and of course, delicious wine. And now, here to talk about this week over a glass of wine is Shelley and Phil. It's wine time!
Hello and welcome to another episode of Wine Time Fridays with Shelley and Phil, and another guest. After 2 weeks of not having guests, Shelley, we're back on the guest train. Let's just do a proper welcome to the episode. It is March 1st today, episode 202, Happy Friday, it's wine time. Shelley, you're so funny. We are pleased to welcome our friend from Walla, even though he's in Portland, from Walla, our friend Jared Funk from Saviah Cellars. Man, we need to have a little gallery that goes, yay!
I'm surprised they don't have that.
Probably do. A couple of weeks ago, we did our 200th episode, and I was really excited because I got to do this.
There you go.
So I'm going to do that whenever I can. We don't have a lot of downtime, Shelley. We have to get right on this.
Mm-hmm.
We have seven wines to taste through.
That's a lot.
Now, Jared doesn't have with him necessarily all of these wines, but he does have wine. And that's really important. Plus, I'm pretty sure he can speak on these.
I bet he can.
Jared, what are you are assistant winemaker there at Saviah?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Phil and Shelley, for having me.
Yeah.
Super excited. We're going to start with the Viognier. And yeah, I'm the assistant winemaker, viticulturist at Saviah. I've been back with the family business for about a year and a half now after traveling and putting some arrows in my quiver from other parts of the world and soaking up some knowledge from other mentors. And now we're taking on the family business. So
I love that.
That's awesome.
So some of the places you visited to add a feather to your quiver, where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio?
So after I graduated I graduated college in December 2020, which my goal was to start traveling. I always wanted to go to Australia and Chile and do some Southern Hemisphere harvest hopping sort of thing.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was kind of in the peak of COVID.
Yeah.
And that put a shutdown on all of that activity. So I actually had the fortunate opportunity to work with one of my favorite people in the world, Sadie Drury. She's the vineyard manager for Seven Hills Vineyard. And I had interned there during college and got the chance to go back for a year to be her assistant, just serendipitously timing. And so I spent a year with her soaking up a ton of viticultural knowledge. And then after that year, it was kind of agreed upon before I even started working that I want to go travel, and I wasn't going to be the long-term option necessarily. And so I left, and my dear friend, Tommy Bigelow, his family has a winery in Woodinville, JM Cellars.
Okay.
He was kind of at the end of his wine traveling harvest career, going back to work for the family winery. And I was kind of just getting started, and we wanted to go somewhere together to do a harvest. So that first one was in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
It was incredible. We got connected by his cousin, Andrew Janik. So it's a small industry. My dad actually learned to make wine with Tommy's dad from Mike Janik and Charlie Hoppus at Three Rivers Winery in 1999. And then Tommy and I became friends completely separate from that. But Mike Janik's son, Andrew Janik, he had worked harvest in South Africa, and he presented the opportunity to us to go work for the winery that he did. And so we went down there, and that was an amazing experience. And then in that fall of 2022, I went to Barolo as well. And so that was kind of the passion of Nebbiolo that I really wanted to learn more about. So yeah, it was amazing.
Well, we should toast this up This is a 2022 Viognier from Saviah Cellars to health, wealth, and abundance, gratitude, romance, and
Peace on earth.
That's a good line right there. So the Viognier, that it's one of my favorite white wines. It's grown right at the winery, so most of that wine is grown right there, and then a small portion of it is grown at the Stone Speak Estate Vineyard. So it's super close to home. It does really well. We're in kind of a cooler pocket of the Walla Walla Valley, and so it retains a lot of fresh acidity and a varietal that's known to be a little bit lower acid for white wine. So we age and we ferment and age that all in a concrete egg. And so that kind of gets, the best of both worlds of what you'd get out of barrel aging without the flavor, but you still get a little bit of the micro oxygenation. It kind of flushes out the palate, gives it a little more mouthfeel, but really focuses on the fruit purity. So it's a lot of stone fruit and a little bit of floral, some citrus notes. It's really, really pure on the fruit, and it's a really fun wine.
When you talk about the mouthfeel on this, boy, I get that big time. This is absolutely delicious. I need to ask what the residual sugar is on this, because it's pretty dry to me.
Yeah, no, that wine would be 100% dry. There's not going to be any residual sugar on it. It is a little bit lower acid, like I was saying, for a white wine, so that does allow the fruit flavor to come through a little bit more. But yeah, it's gonna be dry. The only wine really in our portfolio that has any residual sugar is our Riesling, and that's in the Jack line, and it just has a couple grams per liter, which really, with the acid of Riesling, it's not perceptible, but it really helps to bring balance to that wine. No worries. I was just gonna say another kind of note on the Viognier is that viticulturally, because it's grown in a cooler spot, it is quite the challenge to bring it to fruition every year because of cold events and bud damage. And so the way we farm this is we do this in the rocks too, and we'll get to that later, but we actually save a cane near the base of the trunk every year. And I'm sure you've heard other viticulturists with this same method. It's not anything new, but it basically gives us the opportunity. We'll lay that down, bury it, and let that overwinter underground. And so when you have an event like we did this year, which I was just going through the Viognier and cutting into buds, and there was not a single alive bud to be found.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's sad to see, but it also
you've saved yourself 3 years.
We've done it. Yeah. So we've saved ourselves that crop loss. And last year we went up with new canes, and we actually discovered that there's really not a lot of downfall to doing that, because basically you're cane pruning, right? And so for us, one thing that is always of uber importance is canopy management. Finding that perfect balance of sunlight and shade, especially on a white wine where sunburn can happen over a course of a day or two in 100 degrees. And so when you're cane pruned, it's a little bit easier to manage that canopy. And so it's not how we've historically done it. It's always been the goal to have that be a spur pruned block on a cordon. But this would be the second year in a row now that we've pulled up the cane that was buried and retrained it. And then you basically have one bud putting a shoot out every 3 inches or so instead of 2 buds on a spur. So it cuts the canopy size in half, which
you'll have to deal with that in August.
Could potentially cut the crop in half, but we're usually thinning the crop on most things to find that yield that is going to be best for wine quality anyways. And so it just kind of is what it is, and it makes a great wine every year, but it is a little bit of a challenge viticulturally. So that's something that is a definite defining feature of this wine.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So a month and a half ago, no, it's a month and a half ago, when we had the big freeze, but it was only for like 4 or 5 days, right? But that was enough for the Viognier to do damage.
Yeah, it was really cold.
It was really cold. Yeah. I think you guys saw double digits below zero.
Yep.
Here in Coeur d'Alene, we were -16.
Yeah.
But we weren't here during -16 because we were in the Tri-Cities.
Yes, that's right. That was right around the time that our original
we were going to sit down
interview. But I'd come down with something at that time.
So how many parts in the world do vineyard managers have to worry about deep freezes damaging the vines in the winter, and 100 to 110, well, more than 105 to 100, and well, you guys up to 112 at one point a year or two ago, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, that's quite the extreme.
Yeah.
How many places in the world deal with that?
There's not that many that I know of.
I wouldn't think so.
It's unique for sure to Washington, something that kind of defines our terroir in a way. So I think like when I was in Barolo, for example, my dad came and visited, and we were walking around the vineyards, and we're like, man, this is way too easy. They don't have to worry about farming, or cold freezes. They don't have to worry about irrigation. It's just,
and they basically have it told to them what they're going to, what they can grow, how they can grow it.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
I get it, man. That's interesting.
By the way, choice is always good.
Yeah. This is delicious.
It is.
This is stunning. I am enjoying the heck out of that. We're going to move on to wine number 2, which is the 2021 Barbera, actually a Saviah Cellars. I'm going to do that right now, so I don't have to interrupt you when you're talking. But this is one, Shelley, that we have had, I don't know, 3-4 months ago, and we loved it so much. Jared had sent me a list of wines, and I said, boy, we'd sure love to feature the Barbera. And so he added the Barbera and took another one out. I think it was a Syrah. And I appreciate that. This is so good. But, you know, the next couple wines, we're going to talk a little bit about Italian varietals. Yes?
Yeah. A little homage to Piedmont.
And, how is that supposed to be pronounced? In doing my research, I heard Piedmont. I'm not sure what the right pronunciation is.
I think Piedmont and Piemonte are both correct. It's a difference of languages. So like the city of Torino is also correct as Turin, but it's Italian versus English, I believe. So Piemonte is how you would say Piedmont in Italian, and Piedmont is how you'd say Piedmont in English. But yeah, so the Barbera is it's actually a vineyard designate.
100%?
100% Barbera. Yep.
Beautiful.
It's aged in all neutral French oak, and it's a vineyard designate of Duggar Creek Vineyard, which is on the Oregon side of the Walla Walla Valley. That's also where our Nebbiolo is grown, which we'll taste next. But the one thing that really is important to these Italian varietals, especially Nebbiolo, is a long growing season. And so if you tried to put Nebbiolo in the Rocks District, for example, which is a half a mile away from where this vineyard is, it would not make it to the finish line, because those season endings and beginnings are so much more hard in those cold low spots. So this is a sloped vineyard, so the cold air kind of slides right off of it. You get a little bit a longer growing season. It's a warm site. It's what I've understood is it's kind of a peninsula coming off Vansicle Ridge, which is the ridge along the Walla Walla Valley, all along the Columbia River that has the wind machines on it with the red lights blinking.
Yeah.
And it's just a little bit of a warmer microclimate than a lot of the Walla Walla Valley. And it really allows these varietals to excel. And so the Barbera is one that is kind of unique to find in Washington, in the Northwest in general, and Italian varietals in general. There are a few wineries that do them, but it's not going to be a common find at every winery. And we've made these since 2007, and we really love to have these in the portfolio because it, I mean, especially the Barbera, it's a great introduction to red wine for people. It's fruit forward, it's light drink, it can pair with anything, and it's not aggressive in any way whatsoever. It's just a really enjoyable red wine. And so we love to present it to people who are a little bit shy about red wine, because there's really nothing to be scared of with the Barbera.
Nice to have the easy drinking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a downside, of course, but too easy drinking. But just the ease. You don't have to overthink this wine.
Mm-mm.
This is something
very
that,
light on the talents and tannins, not big.
It's going to be great with or without food. Speaking of, what would you pair this with? And would it be similar to that next one we're going to try?
You know, the first thing I'd go to with the Barbera is just pizza night, pizza or just simple, foods, like pasta, pizza,
hot dogs
like that. Yeah. There's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
And
well, lemon meringue pie. I'm thinking maybe not.
maybe not. But the Barbera is so friendly. You could almost say nothing wrong. So Nebbiolo, which we're going to taste next, on the other hand, is something that can stand up to maybe a little more like a lamb chop or some sort of meat focused dish. It has a little more acid and generally a little more tannin. And so I think, the Italian varietals historically, I think, are made to pair with food, and that's how they do it in that culture. And of course, growing a Barbera or Nebbiolo in Washington is going to be a different expression than it is in Piedmont, but there's still a common thread that can be found in these wines, even though the terroir is going to be a little different, and they do really well with food. So
speaking of that next wine, I think that's a perfect segue.
One of my favorite varietals in the world. So
it's really good. We haven't had a lot of it.
We haven't had a lot of Nebbiolo, period. And now in 2 weeks in a row, we've had a lot, including for the first time maybe ever in Wine Time Friday's history, back to back of the same wine. Because honestly, I looked and I looked and I looked some more, and I could not find, easily anyway, a New World Nebbiolo, because last week we did, for our Open That Bottle night, a 2015 Barolo, we had a Barbaresco, and we had this lovely 2020 Saviah Cellars Nebbiolo, which is the New World. And we went up against some Old World, and I really want to do the Barbaresco and the exactly, and the Barolo, but look at the color on that.
Yes, that's
Shelley was looking at that. What I understand about this particular grape is that it's because it's so expensive. Burgundy is so expensive that people have shifted over to this grape, even out of Italy, and it's very similar. Look at the light and color. Gosh, it's so light.
Yes.
Brownish, a little brownish.
Yeah, but it's not heavy.
We haven't tasted.
No, but this is another thing. Apparently, because I did a little research on this, is that the Nebbiolo grape, it looks so light, but it packs a little bit of a punch, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. especially out of the old world.
Right.
And I think a lot of people try a Barolo or a Barbaresco for the first time and think, holy cow, I'm going to need to try that again in 10 years because the tannin can be so aggressive.
Oh my God.
And, you know, the first thing that struck me with Barolo wines was before I even tasted it was the aromatics of a Barolo, and Nebbiolo in general, I think, is so generous. It's really like going on a journey. You can get anywhere from floral to leather to tar to, you know, sour cherry to ripe cherry. I mean, it can just go on forever. And I think that's one of the most fun parts about wine to me is kind of the aromatic journey between different varietals and different growing regions. And we'll get a really quick masterclass in that in the Rocks District, where the aromatics are extremely unique compared to any other Syrah in the world. But yeah, the Nebbiolo of Walla Walla, while it still has that aromatic complexity, the mouthfeel is quite a bit different than, say, a Barolo. This wine, and it partly is our style of winemaking, but I also think that it's our growing region, the soil. It doesn't have those aggressive tannins, and that's something that we aim to avoid for the most part on all of our wines. We find a lot of enjoyment in drinking a wine that's smooth on the palate, and you want to go back for another glass. And while there's, I mean, Barolo is some of my favorite wine in the world, you have to drink them a little slower. It's great with food. It forces you to slow down a little bit. But for us, you know, we really want to focus on that more of a polished, round mouthfeel.
Well, it's approachable right away, right? Where tannin, a wine that's big and tannic, while it can open up, it will rip your tongue into shreds at the beginning. It really needs the food.
It's interesting because a lot of times the old world is lighter and more refined, maybe not as high alcohol, and the new world is bigger, and especially in the West, bigger and high alcohol. But hotter, this one seems different then.
Yeah, it's pretty elegant. You know, it's not over the top extracted or anything. It's still, you look at the color and it's amazing. It just is what it is. You know, Nebbiolo is a unique varietal, and you can't make it into anything similar into a Cabernet or Syrah. It's going to be what it's going to be. But it still has some of those hallmark traits of Nebbiolo. But again, it's completely different than a Barolo per se.
Where did you guys get the vines?
So this is grown at Duggar Creek Vineyard, both of these. I don't know the origin of the vines, like clone wise, but it was planted around 2006, and it was actually planted for another winery that was going to focus on Italian varietals, Barbera, Nebbiolo. And that winery got out of the game before this even came into production. So the grower
got out of the game means they ran out of money.
Yeah. So the grower at the time called my dad and said, "Hey, we have a couple Nebbiolo and Barbera blocks that have come up. You know, they're open, and if you want them, you can have them." And my dad said, "Sure." And it's been something we've never let go of since that day. So.
Wow, nice.
So your dad has blazed trails. How much is he involved in everything still at the winery? Is he kind of taking a back seat to you guys a little bit?
He's still definitely involved in everything day to day, but the goal going forward is to continue to absorb that knowledge, be his apprentice, and slowly take day-to-day things. He just got back from Mexico. He wants to spend more time in Mexico, but no, he'll always be involved. He's his goal when he started the winery was to focus on vineyard designate Syrahs, actually, and so at that time, at the beginning of the winery, he made a Red Mountain Vineyard Designate Syrah. He made Stillwater Creek Vineyard Designate Syrah. But Syrah is a little bit of a harder varietal to sell in the broader market. People are a little bit shy because Syrah is one of those chameleon wines. You never really know what it's going to be like because it's so terroir driven. The Rocks District Syrah is completely different than the Lewis Vineyard Syrah, for example. It's like almost like a different varietal. But so of course we make a lot of Cabernet. We have a Merlot based blend, but he's always loved Syrahs, and it's something that he's always focused on. And so when he planted our first estate vineyard in 2007, it was in the Rocks District. It was called the Funk, and it was 5 acres of Syrah. That was the first estate vineyard we planted. And we've continued to expand that with the Stone Speak Estate Vineyard, which is about 7 acres of Syrah, a couple acres of Tempranillo, and then some Viognier as well. And so it was for my parents starting the winery in 2000. It was, bootstrapped from the very beginning, very, very small, couple hundred cases to start, and, hand sold every bottle. And slowly but surely, enough hard work and time, people started to come back and the brand started to build. And then we introduced another label in 2005 called the Jack. And that one really took off in the bigger markets, Seattle and Portland. And that makes up a larger portion of our production today. And then the Saviah estate labels and more estate driven wines make up a smaller portion. But 24 years now. And my dad says we're starting to figure it out a little bit. So
yay. What was I just do you happen to know what was your production now? What is your production? So
production now kind of hovers around 25,000 cases.
Wow,
kind of gives or takes based on the market demand on a given year. But I think that's kind of been the sweet spot that we've settled into. If we were going to think about growing, there would be a lot of logistical space constraints to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really the goal for us is not about volume growth anymore. We've kind of found that sweet spot there, but more about expanding the estate vineyard portfolio. And so, it's a real luxury to start a winery with estate vineyards. That wasn't the case for us. It was penny by penny. And so as the brand has become successful, we are starting to put more money back into that vineyard side of things. And, kind of the pinnacle of a wine business in my mind is, estate oriented from vine to bottle. And so we've gotten to that point with a few of our wines, and we want to continue to move that direction more and more. And so it's not about volume growth, I don't think, as much anymore, and more about vineyard and estate bottled wines now. So
nice.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break in a minute, but I want to just double check. Do you, on the Viognier, off the top of your head, alcohol by volume?
Off the top of my head, it should say on the bottle, but
I just didn't want to pick it up. I'm too lazy.
Is it 13.5?
It is 13.3.
Oh, that's very close.
Very close. And then the Barbera, I love it. They have the ABV on the front label, by the way. 14.5.
14.5. Okay.
Yep. I'm guessing that Nebbiolo is pretty dang close to that as well.
It's probably going to be right around there.
14.5 as well. Don't know why I wear glasses if I can't see even with them on. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get a little heavier, Shelley. We're going to go a little bigger.
Okay.
I'm loving it. But quickly before we go, Nebbiolo Day is this Tuesday, March 5th, which is really cool to be able to have this. Go and find a Nebbiolo, or for that matter, a Barolo or a Barbaresco.
You might want to talk about
Nebbiolo Day.
No, the Barolo and Barbaresco and the relation to the grapes.
We did that last week.
Well, everyone didn't listen last
Well,
week.
you may
listen this week.
You may have to go back and listen last week if we don't get to that today.
All right.
But when we come back in a second. Okay. Welcome back to Wine Time Fridays with Shelley and Phil and our friend Jared Funk from Saviah Cellars. We have just tasted the 2022 Viognier, $35 at the winery. The 2021 Barbera, also $35 at the winery. All of these are delicious. And the 2020 Nebbiolo, which we had last week and we're having this week, $40 at the winery. And I wanted to ask you as I open this next wine, Jared, because I forgot before the break, about the Barolo Wars. We talked about that last week, but I'm curious to get your feedback because, by the way, those Barolo Wars, you would be on the newer side of this, right?
Yeah.
So what is your opinion on that whole, because there was this push of doing things not being non-conforming.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. Like we mentioned this last week, but there was this one son that said, I'm doing it this way. He took a chainsaw to the big old, because he wanted to use
That's one of my favorite stories. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I would love to get your feedback on what that means to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a result of wanting to sell more wine because as we know, Barolo can be a little bit off-putting in its early years due to the high tannin, high acid. And I think those what they consider modernists, they saw the opportunity to make a more approachable wine, earlier in its life. And so that involved a little more oxygen integration, which, went from instead of 5,000 liter casks to 225 liter barrels. I mean, it became quite the war between the two factions in Barolo. And the winery that I worked for, GD Vira, they make their wine in a traditional style, but I think they've struck a really awesome balance of not necessarily having to overextend into one side or the other. They make their wines in a traditional style, but it doesn't mean they need to lay down for 20 years. It's not so black and white as that Barolo war had been at one point. But yeah, it's pretty fun to hear those stories of the old world, of the generations kind of, disagreeing. And it's fascinating.
It's not just the wine world that generations disagree. That was the JD Vira. That's how you pronounce that?
GD Vira.
GD. I have written down GD. I just don't know what my letters sound like anymore. I did look for that. Use the
dumb bucket.
Shelley, she doesn't speak loud or often, but when she does, I feel it. We have just opened a 2019 Louis Syrah.
Yes.
From Saviah Cellars. And again, 100%. Oh man.
Yep, it's 100% Syrah, and it's 100% Louis Estate Vineyard. It's in the Yakima Valley, just kind of outside of Benton City and Prosser, and it's a little bit higher elevation. And it's been an incredible Syrah that comes into our portfolio every year. We've been getting it for over a decade now, and it is always, every single year, the darkest wine in our cellar. You see it in the fermentation vessel. It's just inky, and
inky is a great word.
It always reminds me of a cote roti style Syrah. It just has that hedonistic, dark fruit. And it's, cote roti stands for the roasted slope. Or it doesn't stand for, it means the roasted slope. And the way that this vineyard is farmed is they strip the canopy. So when you go walk through to sample grapes at harvest time, all the clusters are exposed. And you'd think, well, you're going to get a ton of sunburn. It's going to be overripe, but it's all about timing. It's all about getting that sun tan before you get that sunburn. And so if you open it up early enough in the growing season, it can actually develop enough protection for itself to avoid that sunburn. And what it does, it just develops its flavors in a different way than it would be if it was shaded for necessarily. But we never really see that much sunburn here. And it's fascinating considering the fact that every cluster is exposed to the sun. But it's just, I think it's always a fun wine to talk about. And I think it's really fun to taste alongside the rock Syrahs that are coming up, the Stone Speak Syrah that we're going to drink next, because you can see the versatility of Syrah. They're both vineyard designates. This one isn't as savory, but it's still super exceptional in its own way. And that's what's fun about Syrah.
Yeah, we had a Syrah from Italy the other day.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I wouldn't have guessed it was a Syrah.
Huh.
I thought it's more like a Sangiovese.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
It certainly wasn't super fruity and it wasn't as dark, but
yeah,
it was interesting.
That's really cool.
It was fun to try that one. I was gonna say something. Oh, what's the latitude of this vineyard? Because we talk so much about the sun and the angles and the slopes, and it really has so much to do also with that latitude. It's a part of the terroir in a sense, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Off the top of my head, I don't know what the latitude is of this vineyard. I know Washington Wine just kind of had a rebranding, and it's latitude 45 that kind of defines Washington Wine. The elevation of this vineyard is about 1,200, 1,300 feet. Mm-hmm. And for example, the Walla Valley, the Rocks District sits at about 800 to 900 feet. So you're about 400 feet above the Walla Valley. And yeah, it's a cool vineyard site. It's kind of unsuspecting. You drive up on it, and then just out of nowhere, you're surrounded by a bunch of orchards, hops, and then there's this amazing Syrah vineyard. The Columbia Basin is great for agriculture, and it's done a pretty good job with wine grapes as well.
We visited a winery down in not very far from here in Idaho, and it was the same thing. We were driving, and like all I see is prairie. It was like the Palouse. Yeah. And then we just came over this little ridge. Voila, there it is. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, the Idaho wine scene is really interesting. Something that I haven't got the chance to get over there and taste yet, but just viewing it from afar, I'm really excited about what's coming out of Idaho.
Jared, next time.
Have you tasted Ribera?
I haven't had the chance to.
You have to taste.
I was going to say next time you're in Coeur d'Alene.
There's a tasting room here. They're down in Lewiston area.
Yeah.
Yeah, their vineyard looks absolutely incredible.
And they're making really good wine. Yeah. And it's all estate. And it's from Idaho.
It's from Idaho.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So yeah, let us know when you're in. We'll go down and taste through some wines down at Rivera, right there in Sherman. So this Syrah is $50 at the winery. And
oh wow.
Well, I feel like I'm getting shamed into using a dump bucket. Can I have a glass?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's 7 wines.
I know.
Okay.
We knew this was going to be a day to challenge us. This is the 2020 the Stones Speak Estate Syrah, and I would like to introduce today's the social web wine word of the week before we even talk about this wine. And then Jared can help us with that a little bit. So the social web wine word of the week is alluvial soil. Alluvial soil. I have a little definition down here, a little description, but Jared, does alluvial soil have anything to do with this wine here? Please say yes.
It does. Yes. Yeah. The Rocks District, it became its own AVA a few years ago, and it's strictly delineated based on soil type, which is an alluvial fan from the Missoula floods. And so they basically traced along the boundary of this soil type, which is Milton Freewater, very cobbly loam. And it's basically, looks like a riverbed. It's cobblestone, and it goes down. Nobody's ever really got the exact, depth of how far it goes down, but it goes down to the bedrock. So 60 to 100 feet. And that's what differentiates it from the alluvial fan in, say, Châteauneuf-du-Pape, because that's a few feet of cobblestones, but it sits on top of clay. And so that's a completely different structure of soil that roots can take hold in. So the roots in the Rocks District are just going deep and, finding water wherever it can, because it's a super well-drained soil. But the history of the alluvial fan in the Rocks District goes back to the Missoula floods, which defines a lot of the Washington wine industry. But specifically for the Rocks District, it was the result of a restriction happening at what's called the Wallula Gap, which is, if you're driving to Walla Walla from Seattle or Tri-Cities, you turn left onto Highway 12 next to the Columbia River. And if you look right, you see these huge, big basalt bluffs that are constricting either side of the Columbia River. And so when the Missoula Lake ice dam failed 10,000 years ago, and the water came rushing across eastern Washington and was heading out, through the geographical low spots to the ocean, it hit a constriction bottleneck at the Wallula Gap. And that caused the water to back up into the Walla Walla Valley. And as it finally would recede out of the Walla Walla Valley from about 2,000 feet elevation, as a lake, it would bring down a bunch of rock and alluvial soil from the mountains. And then, just speaking physics, as it hits a flat ground, it's going to lose a lot of velocity. And the first things to drop out of a solution when you lose that momentum are going to be the heaviest items, which are going to be those rock, cobblestones. Yeah. And so that happened multiple times over thousands of years. And then it turned into what's today the Rocks District. And, the first vineyard wasn't planted there until the late 90s. But it was definitely discovered to be a really fertile growing region for cherries, apples before then. And then around the turn of the century, Christophe Baron took a chance and made some really compelling wines. And it's kind of, the cat's out of the bag now. And so there's been a lot of investments into the Rocks District. It's a small region, it's really it's only about 5-6 square miles. And so there's not a lot of land to go around. So it's finite to be sure, but it makes some really, really terroir driven wines.
We are going to have on this podcast someone who is going to go through that entire Missoula floods thing.
I think you just did.
But you just gave it such a great description because it's everywhere in your region. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and this is this is fantastic. By the way, Jared, you're just a freaking kid, and you speak about this stuff with such a depth of knowledge and passion. It is absolutely in your heart to do this, isn't it?
Yeah, I do love it. You know, I've been running around the vineyards, the winery since I was, as long as I have a memory, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was picking the grapes at the winery when I was 6 for pizza and soda. And you know, I learned the value of a dollar early on. You know, my dad would pay me to help with whatever, you know, probably nothing meaningful, but just to learn the value of work and to be around.
Isn't that meaningful?
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Yeah.
And yeah, you know, it was always fun. I think that even now when there's some like nostalgic smells, and like the smell of harvest, you know, is like a very distinct emotional nostalgic smell to me. And you know, so being around it my whole life, it's just, when I was figuring out what to do, it was kind of a no-brainer. You know, I love, you know, the fact that you can go from, you know, selling wine and meeting awesome people to going into your own world in the vineyard and getting all nerdy about the nutrients of the soil and just be in your own world there, to being super creative with the style of wine you want to make. There's just so many routes you can take the knowledge of wine. And yeah, it was an easy decision for me, really.
Sure. I've told Shelley this before, but we'll go walk by freshly cut grass on a field. It has to be a field for some reason. Brings me back to playing football.
Yes.
It's just so transforming. Our senses are amazingly powerful.
Yeah.
And if you honor that, you're just going to be in a world of deliciousness, really. You know. Before we go to break, I want to just, you know, we don't really talk about scores much, but I'm just noticing on this, we've got 94 points, James Sucking, 93 points, Wine Enthusiast, 92 points, year's best U.S. Rhone varietals from Wine and Spirits. I mean, this wine right here has got some recognition.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, our style of the rocks, and you can do it, you know, all the way to the very extreme, 100% savory driven, really in your face rocks funk, you know, all the way down to, you can make a rocks district Syrah that has just a small little bit of that savory. You know, there is a influence of the winemaker, and you know, our goal has always been to make a wine that speaks of the vineyard, speaks of the terroir, but we still want it to be approachable and enjoyable to most people. And so while a savory Syrah might not be your favorite thing, it's not going to be offensive in the fact that it's just so funky that, you know, you can't even stand to smell it. We want it to be enjoyable, and we want it to be, you know, a balanced wine. You know, I think balance is overstated in the wine industry, but it's truly important, and everybody has a different definition of balance. For us with these rocks wines, it's all about still showcasing what the rocks are, which is a savory Syrah, but not overdoing it. And so, you know, that's just the way we've chosen to go about it. And so
I get white pepper in this.
There's definitely pepper.
White pepper, absolutely. I'm getting that right now too.
Yeah.
I always, you know, the giveaway of a rocks wine to me is sort of an olive tapenade, you know, some sort of briny, salty note. And I'm getting that. And then if you look deep enough, you know, you'll get some red fruit. The Stone Speak Estate Vineyard usually lends itself to a little more of a red fruit profile, whereas our Funk Syrah, which is our other vineyard designate estate Syrah, is more of a darker kind of brooding profile. And so it's kind of fun to compare the two that are, you know, a stone's throw away, no pun intended. And in the intended. Yeah, maybe pun intended there. You know, just the microclimates in in a tiny AVA, there's still variations in what the vineyard can give to you. So we also farm, the Stone Speak completely differently than we farm the Funk. They're both in the Rocks District, which is considered, a little bit of a danger zone from a cold event aspect. But the Stone Speak is 100 feet in elevation lower. It all looks flat, but it is lower. And we have to farm that as if it's going to freeze with the burial canes. And, so we have 3 foot in a row spacing, low cordons, 24 inches off the ground, so that in an event of a cold freeze, which this year our Tempranillo at the Stone Speak Estate Vineyard, we've taken.
Don't say it.
We've taken samples of all the buds. They're dead, but we will not miss a beat because we have buried canes. We'll put them back on the wire. And we planned for it, but at the Funk, we've never frozen down to the ground once.
100 feet.
100, yeah.
Do you just bury one cane or a couple?
We'll usually bury a couple, just to give ourselves the best chance. And then it's not always perfect, but it's definitely a lot better than having to grow from the ground up, so.
And of course, if we don't have one of these freezes, then you just pull the cane, snip it off, and off we go, right?
Yeah, and if we don't have a freeze, then we just, it's going to be a cordon with spur pruning, and so we might see a little bit of a lower crop this year, but it's not going to be detrimental. We'll still get our Tempranillo, we'll still get our Syrah, but it's just a little bit more diligent and thoughtful pruning. And like at the Funk, we're not going to have to retrain like we are the Tempranillo, but we'll have to leave a few extra buds, and we'll have to, adjust some things to try to get to where we want from a yield standpoint. So, that viticulture and farming in general will always keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
So we're recording this in the middle of February, publishing the 1st of March. You're looking at the buds as early as February.
Yeah. Whenever you have a good opportunity of weather, like we're having right now, the weather's been, highs of 50s, no snow, no rain necessarily. You take that opportunity to prune, and because bud break sneaks up on you before you even know it.
Right.
March gets busy. People start to come out to the winery, and events are happening, and bottling and blending. And so you're always wanting to try to be ahead of the curve on farming. And so if you feel confident that you're not going to get another deep Arctic freeze, you can start that pruning process. If you still feel like you're not out of the woods, you just want to wait, let the vine have every chance it can to survive. So right now we're not pruning yet, but we're pre-pruning, which is a mechanical pre-pruner that goes through and just chops off the canes to about 5 or 6 buds. And so it makes it a lot easier when crews are going through to make their cuts and not have to pull big canes out. And so it's been a little slower the last couple months as far as the wine and viticulture world goes, but it's picking up at a pretty fast pace now. We're bottling next week. We're getting ready to prune, and before you know it, it's going to be growing season's back.
For vintage, yeah. So when you're pruning that and they just fall because it's machined, does it catch it or does it fall down?
It falls onto the ground,
and you leave it there for a natural compost.
And in some vineyards we'll go with a flail mower and leave that. But in the Rocks District, it's not a great site for a mower necessarily. So we'll pull those to the end of the vines and we'll remove those differently. But I think a lot of the time we try to chop it up and just put that carbon back into the vineyard.
Sure.
And so
perfect.
Yeah, the Rocks District is challenging in a few different ways. I've been working with a couple other growers to try to figure out how we can introduce cover crops I think most of the vineyards in the Rocks District, as you drive around, are going to have exposed rocks. And whether that's, it definitely plays a part in the wine style. It reflects heat and gets you to a riper spot as far as grape ripening goes. But it also showcases, the terroir. There's an aesthetic standpoint. And then but at the same time, it's so much more sustainable to have that ground covered with grass or cover crop of some point.
Yeah.
So we've been trying to figure out, and also burying canes would interrupt that as well, because you're basically furrowing out, a foot into the row to hill up. And so there's a lot of, fun challenges ahead to figure out how to make the Rocks District, the best from both a sustainable and wine quality standpoint. But it's a slow process in the wine and viticulture world. If you plant a vineyard this year, you're not going to see a bottle of wine from it until almost 2030, so then you don't know if you did anything right for the last 5 years.
So given the semi-early high temps, you may now, of course, lots of variables still, but it's got all the indicators of maybe a earlier spring, earlier bud break.
Who knows what's going to happen, but we've had a little bit warmer temperatures so far. The last couple of years have been later bud breaks, which is actually not a bad thing from our standpoint. When we have vineyards in low spots in the valley, that means we're protected during April when those nighttime frosts come and sneak up on you,
or hail.
That's been an occurrence in Walla Walla in the last couple of years. But this last year, we had a late bud break, and then we had an incredibly warm May, an incredibly warm June. Not too hot, just right to push those vines in. You hardly ever see a vine catch up during the growing season. If you have bud break 2 weeks behind typical, you're probably looking at a late harvest. But it totally, by the time we had bloom, it was back on track. And so it was just kind of perfect weather from a vine standpoint in May and June. And then in 2022, it was a late bud break and then a really late harvest. And so you just never know what Mother Nature is going to give you.
No. We're going to take one more break. And when we come back, we're going to have some fun with some cabs.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome back to Wine Time Fridays, episode 202 with Jared Funk of Saviah Cellars. Jared, as I'm opening up this Walla Walla Cabernet Sauvignon, I want to know whose decision it was there at the winery.
I know where you're going with this.
To bring on Ethan Lillis.
I recruited him personally because when I met him, we'd hit it off, and he was, enjoying his time selling wine, but I could tell he had an itch to, get his hands on some fruit and get his hands on some cellar stuff. And so I told him, if it ever, comes across him to want to work a harvest or come to Walla Walla and work in a winery, that he should give me a call. And luckily for us, that call happened. And he came down to work harvest, and he's been sticking with us. And we're super excited. We love Ethan. So
Ethan's a great guy. I give him a bad time because I care.
Exactly.
We have just opened the 2021 Walla Walla Cabernet Sauvignon from none other than Saviah Cellars. Mm-hmm. That Syrah, the Stone Speak Estate Syrah, it was $60 at the winery. This one is $35. It'll be really interesting to go side by side with the next Cab Sauv, the Funk Estate Cabernet Sauvignon, even though it's going to be in a different vessel. And so let's go ahead and give this a whirl. 2021 Walla Walla Cab Sauv.
Yeah, one of the great vintages that I've seen. I really loved everything coming out of 2021. It was a hot year, but it had so much concentration and a ton of depth of flavor. And I don't think that it was kind of variation based on where the vineyard was and how it was farmed. But from our standpoint, we didn't really see any of the overripe flavors that you'd expect from a hot vintage. It was just more intensity. It was a low crop. Really, the only downfall of the 2021 vintage is there wasn't enough of it. You know, it was a historically low yield. And so this wine, the Walla Walla Cab Sauv, is something that I think provides a ton of value. You know, you don't see a lot of Walla Walla Valley designate Cabernet Sauvignons in that $30 price point.
I was going to say, yeah,
you'll see a Columbia Valley,
sure,
which is great in its own right, but
exactly.
It can be fun to kind of dial in a smaller growing region. And so this one is, I think, just, you know, we try to get it out in front of a little bit more people. We make about 700-800 cases of it. And I think it really just showcases the best of what Walla Walla Valley Cab is, which is that velvety, silky mouthfeel. You know, from a Cabernet standpoint, some people's perspective of Cabernet is that it's a huge, aggressive wine. And again, going back to kind of our house style, that's not really the case with this cab. It's gonna be ready to drink right now, and it's gonna be enjoyable. But we're not sacrificing anything to get to that point. It's just that's what the soil gives us, and yeah, it's a beautiful wine.
It is really nice.
You know, we had Andrew Giroux from Tiridas on, and we asked him about you.
I'm a little scared for this answer.
You guys were roommates.
Yeah.
Which is really cool in and of itself that we've had this perspective. I tried, Jared, to bait him into like saying something that I could hold over. He had nothing but good things to say about you.
He's a gem.
I think he said something about you being a neat freak. Your last name might be Funk, but you're a neat freak or something to that effect.
I can have that tendency, but Andrew and I are still best friends, you know, to this day. Our other roommate, Alex, we try to get together as often as we can. It gets harder and harder, but
is Alex in the wine industry?
Yeah, he is. He's actually leaving for a harvest in Chile in a couple of weeks. So Andrew and Alex are both coming to Walla Walla, and we're gonna have a rowdy weekend together, kind of reliving the college days. So that's so cool. I don't know Alex one way or another, but we sure enjoyed our time with Andrew. Yeah,
and they are doing spectacular things with the sparklers.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Yeah. And, you know, I think the best thing about Andrew is you can't spend time around him without learning something. He just has so much depth of knowledge of the wine industry and wine.
How about a collab between Saviah and Tiridas?
You know, it might happen.
I think that would be really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, this is where you start making your imprint on the Saviah brand. And of course, Tiridas didn't exist. But I mean, it sure seems like they're open for trying new things. And what a fun little project that could be. I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah.
But maybe a Saviah sparkler.
Exactly.
With the Tiridas stamp, you know, it'd just be really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's no rules, you know. So that would be awesome. And yeah, they're pushing the boundary of what sparkling wine is in Washington, and it's pretty cool to see. You know, they're making sparkling red wine out of Cab and Merlot, and you know, it's just really untraditional, which is what the industry needs to progress.
Right.
So,
what about that barrel?
Lambrusco.
Yeah, the Lambrusco style. Yeah. That barrel fermented sparkler knocked my socks off.
Mm-hmm.
It just blew me away.
Yeah, it's pretty fun stuff. It's been so cool to witness, and really proud of those guys. I mean, Gabe, you didn't get the chance to meet Gabe and Matt?
We met Gabe.
We met him fleetingly because someone didn't show up, and so he was going to be with us, but he ended up having to work the front desk.
Yeah.
Which I think that's his wheelhouse.
Yeah, they're all bringing something to the table, and it's just been a cool partnership. So it's pretty awesome.
It's pretty fun. This is a perfect quaffing Cabernet Sauvignon. You know,
you're gonna quaff it.
I'm gonna quaff it out of my glass.
Oh.
Very quaffable. This would work for ravioli. It would work for meatloaf.
Ravioli.
Yeah, you know, the ravioli with a big heavy red sauce. I think.
Yeah.
It has to be homemade though, not Chef Boyardee.
Well, I've never the chef and I have never gotten along.
Oh.
Boyardee. Yeah, this is a very, very flexible Cabernet Sauvignon. And this is also 100%.
You know, this one might have a little bit of Malbec and Merlot. I'd have to look at the tech sheet, but sometimes depending on the vintage, we'll try to find that balance. But it's going to be majority Cab. I don't think it's 100%, but I don't know the percentages off the top of my head right now. What are you seeing?
Well, it's not here, but it does say 17 months in French oak, 30% new.
Okay.
But I am not seeing anything on the website that shows
the percentage.
Yeah. I'm sure in the tasting notes, we'll take a peek.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, 70%, 76% Cab Sauv, 12% Malbec, 12% what? Cabernet Franc.
Yeah.
Love it.
Nice.
This is your left bank Bordeaux right there, isn't it?
When the laws give you the opportunity to make some changes to make it the best wine possible, sometimes take advantage of it. You know, I've seen this wine as high as 96% Cab and as low as 76%. And the cutoff 75% for a varietal designate, and then it's 85% for I believe an AVA, 95% for an estate vineyard. And so, you just kind of work within those boundaries to make the best wine possible given what you have in the cellar, so.
Yeah.
So you have all of these great grapes, this wonderful fruit. Sometimes you have years that are, you have more than you can use for this brand, this label, right?
Yeah.
So you may, or even this label here, and you have the Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use the juice that way, or is the Jack's?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say that's one of the upsides of having a second label and whatnot, right? Yeah,
a huge upside. It's a great, it's mutually beneficial to the Jack and to the Saviah labels, because the Jack is getting some incredible wine. A lot of years, the Lewis Vineyard Syrah, we've had the opportunity to bring in more of that than we need for a vineyard designate. And so that is able to go into the Jack wine, which is a Columbia Valley Syrah. And it's made in 1.5 ton fermenters, aged in barrels. A lot of wines at the Jack's, the Jack price point are made in big tank farms. They never see a barrel in their aging time. And I think that, that's what separates the Jack from our standpoint, from a value and quality standpoint, is we're going through the same steps for everything. And we don't really cut any corners for something that we see going into the Jack. Everything gets the same opportunity. And we really just judge it based on what it is after some time in barrel. And I think, that tier system in a winery really allows both sides to benefit, and it's been awesome for us.
I couldn't agree more. And it's, you're not going to take a bath as quickly as you may if you don't have that option.
Yeah, exactly.
Or throw away bad fruit, or have to sell off wholesale juice and things like that.
Yeah.
We're breaking out the BigAssGlass for this next one. I was watching a little bit of Gary Vaynerchuk back in the day, a little Wine Library TV, and he always has the BigAssGlass. We have these BigAssGlasses, and I love it. This is the 2020 The Funk Estate Cabernet Sauvignon. Comes in, since I brought up Gary's name, I'll say it comes in as 150 bones at the winery.
This one is $75 a bottle.
Oh, okay.
It's sold in 3-packs, and it's the 3-packs are $225 a box, right? What does it say on the website?
Yeah, okay. Oh, sometimes I don't read correctly, Jared. It's $150 for a Magnum.
Okay.
Which makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. $225 for a 3-bottle collection. Yes.
Yep.
So
exactly.
Yeah. So my bad. Thank you for that. That's I should learn to read.
So yeah, it's on the upper end of our price points.
Yeah.
It's been the culmination of a goal of my dad for a long time to have an estate Cabernet, and the Funk Estate Vineyard is a warmer site in the Rocks District, and we grow this in a style that's it's called GDC, and it's Geneva Double Carton, and basically it's a quadrilateral cordon, which gets a really unique amount of sunlight throughout the day because it's spread out, compared to what you usually imagine as a vineyard as a unilateral vertical shoot positioning. A GDC is spread out to the sides, and so it's kind of a sprawling canopy. So as the sun moves over the top of you during the day, it's getting dappled sunlight all day. And there's another vineyard that really kind of showcased what this can be, and that's McClellan Estate Vineyard, which has been really the crown jewel of our cab for a long time. And so when we had the opportunity to plant this in 2016, we took that same training style, and it's been a project. This has been the second vintage. So when we bought the Funk Estate Vineyard, which was planted with Syrah in 2007, the other 5 acres of it were leased out to an apple orchard for until 2016. And so when we had the opportunity to plant that, we went to 5 acres of Cabernet, and it's been a really fun project to dial in on exactly what viticultural techniques make this shine, to the nth degree. So it's been a lot of experiments, different fermentation styles. Early on, it gave us a lot of red fruit, bright red fruit, which was really interesting.
Makes sense. The younger vines, right?
Yeah, it does. But the Funk Syrah has always been dark, and so it was kind of surprising. And then we thought, okay, well, we can try to leave this on the skins a little longer, really extract a little bit of that skin, and get a little more of a darker profile. And then this year, I wanted to try doing a barrel fermentation. So we hit the heads off of 4 barrels, filled them all with the grapes from the vineyard, and we fermented. It was less than a ton of grapes in barrels, but it's to be seen what the results are. But that's how you push the boundaries of a new vineyard. And so for this one, we're kind of dialing in on the style, but it's been really expressive from day one. As a young vineyard, it's showcasing really well. And
how many vintages on this Funk Cab?
I think so 3.
So the 2020 is only the second vintage off.
Yeah, if you're planting in 16.
Yep.
And so the first one is 19, but again, probably not what the ultimate representation of those vines are going to be.
Yeah, exactly. And it's you think about what you get off of 5 acres is if you get 2 to 3 tons per acre, 15 tons. But then you come down to this wine, and we're at 90 cases, 100 cases. I can't remember exactly what this is. You're looking at 3 barrels out of 30, and so it's a really, really reserved level representation of what we have in the cellar. And that's the goal with this wine. We really just want to pick the best barrels, the best representation of this vineyard, and continue to do that as we build the brand. And so
I love that. We are going to start wrapping up. A couple things to mention, but I wanted to just say in May, when you said that you were down in Australia, we are having the son of the founders of Molly Duker Wines on in May.
Oh, that's awesome.
We're having Luke Marquis on.
That's really cool.
We're so excited, and we are going to actually taste through the Velvet Glove, which is
wow.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. We have been big fans of Molly Duker because of the Molly Duker shake.
Yeah.
But they make great wines.
They do. They do.
So love that, and anything to get people past Yellowtail as the the marker for Australian wines. We're here to help.
Yeah.
So,
but they did have a blue ocean strategy.
They had a blue ocean strategy.
Yellowtail.
Yellowtail. Ugh. I don't even like to say that. Some wines we enjoyed this week. I'm going to blow through these pretty quick. Drops of Jupiter Sauvignon Blanc, the Wind Vane Estate Grown Chardonnay, Elway's Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon, and the Walls Stanley Groovy. So, yeah. And then some things coming up in March. We're the 1st of March. In 2 days, you have Mulled Wine Day. Remember,
in March.
Yeah, go figure.
It should be in December.
Keep in mind that on Tuesday is Nebbiolo Day. So we have Mulled Wine Day. That's the 5th is Global Nebbiolo Day. The 13th Riesling Day. The 26th International Viognier Day. We had a Viognier today. It was fantastic. The 27th World Marcelon Day. And in April, we have the 14th International Tannat Day. April 14th is the International Tannat Day. 17th World Malbec Day. And coming up, we have John and Dan from Foolhardy. Next week, not sure. Not exactly sure, but we may have a guest and or a Washington State Riesling since Riesling Day is coming up. Big thanks for our sponsors today, CDA Gourmet and Elsom Cellars. And I wanted to just thank you, Jared, so much. This is a fantastic lineup. If you have, there is Saviah on the shelves here in Coeur d'Alene and all over Washington. There are great bottles of Saviah.
And then there's the website.
And then there's the website, but you'll find the Jack. The Jack is lots of restaurants have the Jack because it's a great wine by the glass to pour. Also on the shelves, and of course the Funk Syrah I see on the shelves all the time. I have not seen the Funk Cab Sauv until just today, but you can always ask.
Yes.
Ask your retailer. Bring some of this in, please. Shelley and Phil had it on this podcast, and it sounds delicious. So, Jared, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for taking part of your weekend out.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be on the podcast, and it was a lot of fun. So
we will see you when you visit Coeur d'Alene, or you may see us when we visit Walla.
Yeah. Come back and visit us.
We will. Remember, with a little bit of knowledge, wine becomes a lot less overwhelming. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week. It's like that surprise box. Ooh. Next week on Wine Time Fridays.
Oh, this.
Thank you. Jeez.
Thank you for spending part of your day to wind down with Shelley and Phil. Remember, you can listen to any episode of the Wine Time Fridays podcast by visiting winetimefridays.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us on our Wine Time Fridays Facebook page, Instagram, or on Twitter, which is @VintageTweets, for daily conversation. Until next week, here's our toast to you. To health, wealth, abundance, gratitude, peace on earth, and of course, romance.